It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnet Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here.
Good moment. This is Barnet Bain. It's a pleasure to be with you again this week. I say that every week, and every week I mean it.
That's good.
You getting calls there, Freeman?
You're an honest guy. No, I was looking at my phone because, I went to the Kubrick exhibit, Stanley Kubrick exhibit at LACMA, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, this last weekend.
Yeah.
I took some pictures. There's some quotes that I think are phenomenal. Do you mind if I read one?
Oh, please.
Okay, so Stanley Kubrick says this. The truth of a thing is in the feel of it, not the thinking of it. The basic purpose of a film, I believe, is one of illumination, of showing the viewer something he can't see any other way.
Wow.
Yeah.
To remind any of our listeners who aren't familiar with Stanley Kubrick, the great film director of Paths of Glory, Dr. Strangelove, Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon, The Shining,
Space Odyssey,
a little film.
A little film.
A little mind blower, 2001, A Space Odyssey, Full Metal Jacket, and on and on and on. So that's a portal into all kinds of exploration. What did that stir for you?
So we've talked a lot about being changed by something, having experience, a kind of revelation where change happens in an instant. I mean, we may spend 30 years, learning and growing and even studying something. Mm-hmm. And in an instant, we get it in a different way. Mm-hmm. That's a powerful experience. There's also the experience of, we've talked about on this show, glimpses of possibility. Something opens up, and especially if it's experiential, where we experience something, and then we don't know what it is, but we know that it's had an effect on us. Seeing one of Stanley Kubrick's movies, any one of his movies, you walk away thinking about it, like being bothered by it. I think of Lolita even. I mean, that is a disturbing film, and yet very human, very dimensional. So he really, outside the box isn't sufficient. There's a way that I'm expanded by certain films. There's something about the experience where it affects me in a way.
Well, we talked earlier before the show about intelligence.
Yeah.
We were talking about how people throw that word around, and it's become a Rorschach test. Intelligence is whatever we decide it is, and so often Stanley Kubrick's films are incredibly intelligent.
Yes, they are.
By a particular measure, they're an invitation into a private vision of things that invites us to both think and to feel. The interplay between thinking and feeling, when that interplay allows for the arising of revelation, something between the thinking and feeling, that is a hallmark of intelligence, not simply smarty-pantsness.
Right. not just smartest boy in the room.
And the gift of being a brilliant artist like Stanley Kubrick is that it is not only the sharing of his own worldview that he's concerned with, but stimulating of the revelation that emerges in the dance between thinking and feeling. That's an experience that he very consciously is creating for environments that he's creating for his audiences.
Yeah.
So I have to just share this with you because you brought up Stanley Kubrick. When I was a student, I was living in London. I was going to film school. I had a nighttime job at the Panavision.
That's a great nighttime job for a filmmaker.
It was a great nighttime job.
Panavision, for listeners, is a a camera company.
All the cameras at the time, not so much anymore, but back in the day, that was the gold standard. Everybody shot on Panavision equipment. and I was the guy who was there all night long, and taking orders from companies would call in. I need this and this and this, and I want it shipped to such and such a location or such and such a studio, and I would take the orders, and it would go into one of those big tube things and disappear into piping. Get sucked into the. It was.
I love that.
Yeah, it was fabulous.
Yeah.
So I get this phone call, and this voice comes on, mid-Atlantic. It was not quite UK, not quite American, and he wants this, and this shipped to Huck Films. Goodbye. The next day, same thing. The next day, and this is like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
So about after the third time, I say, Huck Films, that's Stanley Kubrick's company, isn't it? Isn't it? I say. I know full well because I have the billing thing in front of me, but isn't it? And there's a beat, and the voice on the other end of the line says, yes, it is. And it's the middle of the night. So I say,
oh, it's him himself.
I say, is this?
Oh, that's
I just have an intuition. Is this Mr. Kubrick? There's a beat. And he says,
I love it.
And he says, speaking at your service or something like this.
Oh, I love that.
I'm
Oh,
18,
that's
17, 18
great.
years old. I'm floating. I'm not even in my chair now. So I have the boldness or the audacity or the naivete to
Whatever
say,
it is, yeah.
whatever it was, I say, have you seen any good movies?
Oh, what a great
So
question.
he says to me,
Oh, my
he's
God.
at the middle of the night. I think I could see him in his pajamas in my head, in my mind's eye. He says to me, unfortunately, I don't. But I have the studio in Los Angeles send me every week a reel of the latest commercials, particularly like the ones on the football games.
Oh, my God.
That is the finest and most innovative filmmaking that I see these days.
Oh, my goodness. How
So
crazy is that?
Anyway, my Stanley Kubrick story.
That's fantastic.
I take it that story was not part of the LACMA exhibit.
It wasn't. It should have been.
It should have.
Along with his favorite commercials.
I know.
It
should.
would be great to see what were his favorite commercials. But the idea that where that was the cutting edge for a lot of people. They were willing to take risks, and some of the most creative people were in the commercial game. Hey, I want to talk a little bit today about blame.
I don't blame you.
That's really helpful.
Why not?
And how quick.
Who can we blame?
Yeah, that's another one. So
We live in a culture of blame.
that's right. I know given time we'll find a way to blame this on somebody. We can make
Spence.
this. Let's make it
blame
Spence's
it on,
fault.
let's blame it on our friend and producer, Spence.
Because it's such a slippery slope. It's so quick to see how my mind assigns blame and how it orders and organizes stuff into these little compartments that binds me to what we call the reservation, that binds me to a certain set of agreements. And
Look what happened to me.
Yeah, look what happened to me. This is why. We've talked about this, the why I'm here, why because of this, and this, versus something else. And the something else is what I want to explore.
Great. Get out your flashlight. We should get out our guest as long
should.
as we're going to jump down that rabbit hole. Well, we have with us today Jay Fizzett. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Jay, he is the president of Personal Best Seminars, a leading development company in Canada, my home and native land.
Yeah.
Should I get up and say that?
You should salute some flag. We have an American flag in the studio.
We do, don't we?
We should get a Canadian flag.
Well,
We should
I'm
be
holding.
equal.
I hold two passports, so it just depends
All
which
right,
way
all
the
right.
camera's shooting.
That's right.
He's the author of Reframe Your Blame, a
Oh,
Canadian
yeah.
bestseller. How to be
Yeah.
personally accountable. He is here today to be personally accountable to us, and we have some
he's
things.
got a
We have some
flashlight.
blame we want to throw at you, Jay.
Make a number, get in line.
Exactly. I hear
welcome.
it's snowing up there in Calgary, and I hope you're ready to take responsibility for that.
Yeah, you caused it.
In fact, I ordered it in exclusively for this spring.
Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm truly excited about being here. I appreciate it, and I love the work you guys do.
What is your favorite Kubrick movie? I won't blame you if you say one that I don't like.
Actually, 2001 was something that as a kid I was, literally stunned by, confused by, and drawn back to over and over and over again over the years. And I quite love it. And the 2001 Space Odyssey, that the theme there is something that I've incorporated into a bunch of programs I've done just because it's meaningful to me for lots of different reasons. So that's absolutely the one for me.
I was in a training. Were you in this training when they were playing that, and that was to get back in the seat? Oh, plays that Ray Blanchard.
Ray Blanchard
Does. That's right.
Yes, in fact, Ray and I do similar work actually. So that's how part of our family tree of history.
Stanley Kubrick and I do similar work, but nobody would ever notice that. That's like saying. It's like saying that.
But you did talk to him once on the phone. So
I did.
That actually links you to him.
Yes, I did talk to him once on the phone, and there we have it. You can't blame me for that.
No, I can't. So let's wander down this path because, Jay, you've obviously written a book about this and considered it, and a big part of the training is moving people out of victim and into responsible. So that's the place where we become empowered, is at the level of ownership. How do I own what's going on in my life versus how do I, find someone to blame
Shift responsibility
on or something to blame it on?
This is such a complex and multifaceted topic.
Well, we don't have to talk about it.
That much resistance.
Never mind.
Let's go back to talking about movies.
No, let's go back to it. Seriously.
Well, it's just fascinating to me because even our languaging around it is, I'll use the English language, and it's not like I speak a bunch of others, but the English language I think is woefully inadequate to describe what this thing is. And even the word responsibility, Freeman, I actually have some issues with because I think that it causes additional difficulties. And if I could tell you just a brief story about how I wrote my best-selling book and all of those pieces. When I was about 18 years old, I had a construction company with a partner. We worked like mad for a year and a half. At the end of the year and a half, my partner, senior friend, goes to the accountant, comes back, and basically says we're bankrupt. And I had invested everything I had, including putting a car in the company's name. And after a year and a half of the hardest work and what I thought was building my future, I end up penniless and carless, and our business went bankrupt. Mm. And it was this painful, gut-wrenching, terrible thing that I punished myself for years about. And remember that line, I punished myself.
What was the story that you told yourself?
Oh, it was pretty clear. I was, the ripe old age of about 19 years old when we started, so I was about 21 and a half when it died. And
so you had a bunch of shoulda, woulda, couldas.
No, actually, I wasn't even that sharp about it, to be frank, Barnett. I was. My partner was a rotten you-know-what, and he ripped me off and didn't do his job. I held up my end of the bargain, and he completely pooched it and stole my money.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And by the way, got some mileage out of that story.
Sure. Yeah, no, you can find people who collude with you on that one.
So what was fascinating about this is that, and I had this box of receipts and, the mess of the end and all the rest of it, that for about 2 years afterwards, I'd make the walk down the hallway, which was really 20 feet, but as I'd start to walk towards the
long walk.
Yeah, it was like the MGM. You ever been in the MGM, where you get into one of the the 2-mile hallways to get to your hotel room in Vegas?
Yeah.
It felt like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, that experience happened. And then I dedicated myself to being responsible, using the phrase that you had talked about, and in fact spent better part of 15 years teaching people about responsibility and accountability and what it means. And I created some pretty fantastic results and made a little bit of money and all of those things.
So what are you feeling responsible for now? And we usually thread back to the trailing bits, the loose edges, the dangling, the hanging chads, and you've pretty much you certainly cover that in your work over the years and in your book. We've explored that a great deal on this show. Mm-hmm. The responsibility for what is beautiful and good and true, for what is emergent, for what is light and bright, for what is possible, for our dreams, for who we really are to each other. I am interested on what you have to say to us about responding to the challenges of possibility.
Oh, I love that. May I dodge it for a moment, though?
Sure.
Because I think that it is implicit is that we cannot respond to the possibilities until we have actually come to terms with what personal accountability actually is. And one of my greatest, I think, gifts after having several run-ins with the victim experience, as most of us as humanity has, is that I have come to understand a distinction where we have, and this is my perception / experience, that we have a world full of people trying to leap over this idea of personal accountability to engage in possibility, to engage in beauty, to engage in all these pieces. But the truth is they're still emotionally hooked and stuck to some victim story, often unconscious.
Like personal, premature transcendence syndrome.
It's the wanting to get over the victim versus having a relationship with our victim experience. Hey, listen, we need to take a quick break. Let's come back.
Don't blame me for that.
It's Barnett's fault. He talked too long about Stanley Kubrick. No, that's not true. We're going to take a break. It's no one's fault. We'll be right back after these messages. Stay with us here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And we're back.
Thank you for sticking with us. We are back. We
Just
are back.
barely. We made it back.
Before we broke for those fine messages.
Yes.
You were going to say something profound. I don't want to put you on the spot, but
it was really
it better be profound now.
I was really going to talk about, and I started talking about it.
The blame game.
Well, we were talking about the blame game, but actually I was talking about when you said premature transcendence syndrome, which is our words, people sometimes say spiritual bypass. When I think, Jay, what you're talking about is wanting to get over, or a lot of times people want to fix. They realize there's a victim experience where they're feeling victimized. They realize maybe that's even disempowering. The idea where I think most people go wrong is to demonize the part of them that feels victimized versus relate to it in a constructive way so it's not running the show. That was my 2 cents.
Well, and it's a brilliant 2 cents because the fundamental
That's a nickel.
premise of my book is that the real gift of our recurring victim experiences, and my belief is recurring is 2 times or more, okay? The gift of a recurring victim experience is that it is a signpost or a clue to our very mission for being on planet Earth. It is God's spirit, universe, the great aardvark in the sky, depending on what your beliefs are, giving you a little tap on the shoulder that says, hey, on the other side of this is part of the reason you're here. But most of us just shine up the story and tell it to our friends over a glass of wine and beer, as opposed to flipping the coin over to say, so if my recurring experience is around rejection, what must I learn about love? If my recurring victim experience is about I can't, what must I nurture and develop with my own sense of power? And turning that coin is a incredibly powerful experience, but most people try to do it too early without actually hanging out for a moment or two in what the experience is, what the tap on the shoulder is, all of those pieces. Now,
So now let's flip to the other side of the coin. We are interested in not only developing responsibility, taking responsibility, building the responsibility muscle.
Barnett, can I jump in?
Yes.
Okay, so, and this is the point I was trying to get to, albeit with too many words, given our time. So I'm on a passionate movement to eliminate the word responsibility from this conversation.
All right, we're done. We won't say it again.
And here's the reason why. If you think about this as a pendulum, okay? If you were holding a pendulum and it swung far to the right, we would call that experience external blame victimization. So in my experience with, being a teenager in business, some rotten you-know-what stole my money after I worked the hardest I had in my entire life. So that, everyone has a story about some he, she, it, they, them that did it to us. But here's where our society has gone awry on this topic, is that when the pendulum swings all the way back to the far left, people call that responsibility. I'm responsible for this. And this whole word of responsibility still has a deep...
Well, let's broom it to the side. Let's broom responsibility to the side. We're we're going to go with that. And let's substitute a new word. Let's, for purposes of this show, let's talk about being close and intimate and being in relationship. Relational.
Yeah, that's what I was writing.
With
Relational.
aspects of ourselves with which we were previously not intimate, that we thought existed outside of ourselves.
Love that.
And so that we have an entirely different response to the challenges of life, but without the onus, without the burden of having the R word that is tainted with so much pain and baggage and cultural burden. So as you said, there is this other side of the coin that happens when we can look at those challenges and extract from them certain treasures, certain gifts, certain gold that have to do with what our potential is and what grace we might be here to give, what destiny we might be here to serve up that is self-chosen, that is not an assignment. That intimacy, that response to life, on the shoulders of the workout that we've received, dealing with the constricting parts, we are now increasingly masterful, can be increasingly masterful, about owning and recognizing and leveraging the more powerful mirrors of our life. And I'd love you to speak to that, because after we've developed all of this capacity dealing with this ugly stuff that we've pushed away, the same talents are now highly developed in order to bring closer and get really up and relational with what's wonderful that we want to develop and see more of and have more of.
Well, and that is the key piece, is that if we can genuinely do the work, and I use the spiritual bypass word, if we can genuinely do the work to get to the pendulum hanging dead center in the middle, which we would call personal accountability, and this idea that I call forth everything and I co-create everything, all as an evolution for me stepping up to who and what I am and what I'm capable of and what is possible for me.
Yeah.
And in my book, we divide it into three different levels of personal accountability, and the first of which is just emotional response accountability, which is doesn't much matter what happens, I have the capacity to choose. Then practical accountability is I have the capacity to, number one, I acknowledge my co-creation. I am co-creating everything. I was listening to your show with Bruce Lipton and how he was talking about the channels and the participating in our very experience, and by participating in it changes, and it's like I love that. He put it beautifully. But I am co-creating my experiences, and there's always something for me to learn. There's a clue about my reason for being here. And then the third level of accountability is this spiritual accountability that, quite frankly, I chose my parents, and I will choose the time and place of my
let's go back to the clue for a second.
Yeah. Okay.
This show is about the edge.
Yes.
And you are alluding to clues that can be extracted from these challenges. Mm-hmm. These clues are the trail of what is next for us that is glorious. So what from this process of reframing our blame, we're reframing it into a context of celebration? I'm just throwing out a word.
Well, there's a frequency in that. So what I think Barnett's talking about is there's a response that's very, I used the word constructive earlier, curiosity, compassion, celebration, that this is ways of responding to wonder. Because even as you were speaking, Jay, the idea that there's a possibility outside my current frame of reference. In other words, I can't see even my own possibilities because I'm so tied to this small story that binds me, But getting that loosened up, we can start to see, even in the small stories, some really beautiful threads that can be followed into unlimited possibilities, frankly, right?
And how do we look into the mirror and see the blame piece and see the trailing bits? And increasingly, as you say, when that pendulum hits center point and starts to swing the other way, how do we look into the mirror and see what is glorious, and how do we celebrate what is beautiful? How do we celebrate what is charmed and what is enchanting? How do we feed that with love and with attention and with focus? How do we build upon that?
Yeah, and I think to get there, and I think that there's this prerequisite, which is to get there.
Well, let's assume we're there.
Okay.
Let's assume, because I love the conversation about to get there.
Yeah.
And so let's assume that we are sufficiently down the path that we can actually turn around and look up the path.
Okay.
What's on the other side that we can discover about ourselves and about each other with the benefit and through the lenses of what of the disciplines that we've acquired in looking and reframing the blame and the small story? What tools have we become mighty at that we can now turn towards the admission of and the recognition of what is great about us?
Yeah. Wow, that's a fabulous question, and it is so unique. And I think the thing for me about it is that when we are in that space, we are welcoming of all. And in terms of, and it gets back to what I think, Freeman, you were talking about this curiosity and this engagement. But I think the most fundamental piece for me is I am welcoming of all. Wow. It doesn't much matter what happens and the mechanics and the processes. I'm always asked the question of, and what does it mean about me? What does it mean about my mission? Because from my perspective, when people get clear about contextualizing the blame programming, both external and self-blame, that's that big piece on the other side, what most people call responsibility. When that happens, inspiration flows in that comes in every aspect. I mean, it's a little bit for me like, and this is a kind of a silly metaphor, but it actually works. It's like unplugging the drain. When the drain is unplugged, anything and everything flows through.
Yeah, that's it.
And we're present to whatever happens and what is flowing. But so long as the clog is there, we're kind of stuck. So, I have people who, came up with, had lofty goals about what their mission was going to be and how this was going to look and what their influence on the world was going to be. And as soon as they let go of the victim stories, they were really, really clear that they were to be the world's greatest parents.
That's
that
great.
It wasn't about some large, big thing that was driven by ego out of victimization. It was about, I'm going to be present. I'm going to be one of the world's most rock star parents, and look out, world, here I come, because it's far better to give all of myself to my family than portions of myself to people all over God's green earth.
That is great.
Well, and it includes the part of me that has, the victim story, because that's the big, again, there's no point of arrival. It's something where we come into a relationship with aspects of our experience wherein we can hold them, right? Barnet and I have called it a biggering process. I know that's not a word, but it's an expanding, I guess, process.
Actually, that process is illegal in many states.
It is. But
in Canada, it's totally legal, and we call it expanding context.
But it shows up. It shows up as a kind of presence, right? And really, what we're doing in all the work that any of us have done is we are expanding capacity to handle more possibility. I mean, that's what this entire show is built on, is the idea of the edge of possibility. What is that for me? And every day there's a kind of nudging towards more and more and more of what I don't know to come online and become assimilated into my experience. Starting off talking about Kubrick, the beauty of art is that, and I'm sitting, of course, across from a filmmaker, and it's such a great way to look at, here's a path of expression that has so much opportunity to, we've used this language, Barnett's used it, I've used it, to discover and be discovered by a process and to become more and more present to more and more, right?
And to me, the piece about the becoming present to a process is that there's this question, Barnett was asking, so what's on the other side of it? And I think the entire universe is on the other side of it. And the question that I continue to ask myself, and I serve and support my clients and people who are in the classroom with it, is simply this, is that if this experience means something about my mission, what does it mean, and how will I live it and apply it? And
beautiful.
And one of my great challenges about, and this goes back to spiritual bypass, or people talking about responsibility and personal accountability but not necessarily living it, is I always ask people, so if that's if this is the meaning you've attached to it, what are 3 ways in which you're living that in your life right now? How are you applying it with your kids? How are you applying it with your business? How are you applying it in your next book? How are you? It's that bridge to me that I'm most important, because then we're present to the process. Then the water continues to flow through the pipe. Then there's always a new opportunity. Then there's a new expression. But the moment that we intellectualize it, well, that's just one more idea, and frankly, it doesn't matter.
No, that's right, where it actually becomes something we're expressing. But I have an answer. What's on the other side of this? More, right? What's on the other side of my limited perception and my limited patterning? What's on the other side? It's more. So again, the other side, the edge of possibility on the other side of it is more. And we don't even know where more is going to take us.
Stanley
I call it
Kubrick.
freedom, actually. I have it in my mission statement saying that I manifest freedom through personal accountability, because if I'm not being personally accountable, freedom isn't even on the option list.
Yeah. And more. Go ahead, Barnet.
Well, I love what you just said, Jay. We're not being personally accountable. We do not have access to what is beyond the control, and that is the opening of the heart. If we don't have access to the heart, there's not a lot of control in the heart. There's character, there are values, but there is not the rigid boundaries. And so until we can bypass the desire to deny or to hide with various controls or blaming, we are not really able to open the heart. I was going to say earlier that Kubrick in Dr. Strangelove, a great quote that I think speaks to this: "There is no fighting in the war room."
Yeah, that's from Dr. Strangelove.
Dr.
That's hysterical.
Stop! No fighting in the war room.
So, Jay, before we let you go, I want to give folks some information of where they can get in touch with you, where they can find out more about your work. What's the best website to give folks?
That's a good question, because there's a bunch of them. And frankly, if somebody is interested in this idea of personal accountability and the evolution and the six stages, they can just go to my blog, jayfiset.com. That's JAYFISET.com. If they use the little opt-in box, you can download a free version of the book, a PDF, so that you can begin to play with this.
Wow!
It really is my rant and mission in the world to help people step through to freedom by understanding this very subtle little piece of blame that happens. And for most people listening to your show, this cutting edge, they're not in the old external victim stories of blaming he, she, it, they, them. It's a really subtle little piece that happens internally. It's a really subtle little piece of negative self-talk. It's a really subtle little piece that mastering that just opens the floodgates. And if I could be of service in any way, shape, or form to do that, heck, get the book for free. Just download it and play with what it means. And
step through to freedom with Jay. And Jay, we thank you for stepping through to friendship with us.
Yeah.
We also share a personal friendship, the three of us, and that's a treasure to us. Thank you for joining us here. We look forward to having you back the next time. And listeners, please stay with us after these words. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with Barnet Bain.
And with our new music. I just love that music.
I do too. I want to read another Kubrick quote, though. Because others
you're his biggest fan.
Talk about the music again.
This is only the second time we talked about the music.
How can we decide what comes from the inside and what comes from the outside? The extrasensory perceptions or hallucinatory projections? That's actually about The Shining, like the.
Well, I know that he was referring to his own kind of metaphysical conundrum, but what an incredible question to ask. That is now 35 years ago, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So I don't know about you. I'll throw out my own experience of that there isn't a difference.
Well, there isn't.
There is no difference between the inside and the outside, and I think that what so many call this shift, we keep hearing the shift, the shift, the shift. I think that at least one of the symptoms of whatever that is being referred to as this shift of paradigms or of understandings of our relationship between this quote-unquote self and all that is, at least some of it has to do with the collapse of inside and outside, a subject and an object. It's the Gospel of Thomas. That's twice in the last month I think I've alluded to that. But
Just bring it up again. It's brilliant.
It's a great quote of attributed to Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas, one of the Gnostic Gospels, not part of the canon of 4. And Jesus says, when you make the inside like the outside, and the up like the down, the masculine like the feminine, when you make them all equal, when you claim them all, that therein is power. That is the landing of the kingdom of God. That is heaven on earth.
Yeah.
It's not out there. We're in it. This is it. It's a response, I think, to the same question. It's almost as if he is responding to Stanley Kubrick as a stand-in for all of us.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and what I personally, the nightmare part of The Shining, and the idea that I'm creating all of the nightmares in my experience, that they're all these nightmares, these fears are playing upon themselves and generating all these expressions that represent a kind of nightmare. That part is really palpable. Like, is this real or is it being imagined? Again, it doesn't make any difference.
We have some cameras in our little flip cams in our studio here. If we take, and I know everybody has played with a version of this.
Right.
If you take one camera and you point it at the other camera, or you take a camera and you point it at yourself on a closed loop on a TV screen, it'll replay and replay and replay back into infinity images of yourself. Me shooting a camera, shooting me, shooting a camera, shooting me, back and forth and back and forth. It's like setting up mirrors, reflecting back and forth on mirrors, infinitely. And I think that's what happens.
Yeah.
In our consciousness, and I think that's certainly what The Shining is about me. What The Shining is about for me.
Right.
Probably both are true.
Right.
Probably it was equally true that's what I'm about in The Shining, and vice versa. We're looking at ourselves, and looking at ourselves. That's what The Shining was about.
As a head trip, it can end there, or not even end. It can be like, that's okay. I get it conceptually, but what my sense is, where this becomes an opportunity to expand, is what we were talking about earlier when we were talking to Jay, was the whole idea of compassion, curiosity. At the end of the day, one of the things that I say to clients, and it's sort of prescriptive, is, can you love it? Simple, 2 words, love it. Love it. If you can love it, it expands the experience in a way that is very constructive. Now I can begin to be with it in a different, from a different vantage point. And it's interesting. This all, we'll have to put this together a little bit. That's what creates the presence. It's a level of ease, even with the dis-ease, even with the discomfort, that makes it really okay, that makes it, that integrates it. Again, this word integrity. Can I really hold all of the aspects of me, in a level of ownership? We won't use the word responsibility.
And
level
flip
of
it.
Ownership. Yeah.
And flip it. We were having the beginning of this discussion also with Jay. Can I hold the down line? Not really the down line, but can I also be held? Can I love those parts of myself, but can I also allow myself to be loved by the more of me?
That's right.
If there are these, we're increasingly becoming aware of more and more aspects of ourselves, largely lesser parts. Here's a part of me that is still in arrested development from something that happened at an early time. there's a part of me that is still caught up in beliefs and systems and emotional patterns that I can't quite let go of betrayal or disappointment or something from another time in my life. If I'm aware of those and beginning, and you know, as you say, can you love those? Can I also flip it and realize, well, is there more of me? Are there parts of me that are discovering me? Or is more accurately, they probably very well aware of me. Am I willing to be seen by more of me? And am I willing to open up and develop a relationship with the more of me that I have not yet been either willing or ready or believed possible or had access to for whatever reasons? Can I love? Yes, but can I receive love equally?
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Because the shift that we were talking about in the earlier part of the show, again, the word presence, where it becomes a presence, it becomes a kind of, it shows up very clearly as a way of being in the world with all these aspects of us. It's not a personality or a persona. It's not something we understand conceptually, you know, because that always shows up as incongruent, right? It shows up in a way, and lots of people in our world have studied this stuff and they understand intellectually, but there's a lack of experience. It hasn't clicked in. And so it shows up, you know, kind of one-dimensionally versus multi-dimensionally. And that frequency shift comes with a very sincere acceptance, like a deep down love it, a deep down holding of the parts of us that show up. Because from the initial frequency, which Jay was talking about, of the resisting it and rejecting it and judging it and denying it, and like, you know, that kind of rigid responsibility, which is nowhere near loving it, is nowhere near the frequency of being curious about it, nowhere near the frequency of caring about the parts of me or the part of my life that showed up in that way.
That's not to say that we don't hold boundaries.
Right.
You and I were at a meeting a few weeks ago with someone who was talking about their experience with the Dalai Lama, and the Dalai Lama was very clearly holds a boundary. No.
Right.
You know, it isn't. So this opening to love does not mean we self-abandon.
No. Well, the Dalai Lama is picking up on presence. It's very interesting. What this person was saying was that they had a whole a pitch, as it were, ready to go for the Dalai Lama, but before they even started on all of that, just in the initial exchange, it was clean enough and clear enough that he didn't even get to do his pitch. The Dalai Lama said, "Sure, I'll do it. I'll do this thing. Just send it to me, and we'll do it. Sounds great."
So there
because
are different.
He wasn't
different modulators of rapport.
That's it.
And so all that I was saying there is, and this add-on is great. There are different modulators of rapport, and we don't dismiss distinctions. There is still some discernment about where love chooses to play. It's just it's not that it is not denying anything, but it does have boundaries. So he was saying the Dalai Lama was making his choices with other kinds of discernments, and yet he had an appointment calendar. Not everybody threads the needle.
Absolutely. No, what I love about that, and maybe we've changed topics a little bit, but maybe we haven't, is the Dalai Lama.
Boy, that would be unusual.
That's right. His
change lanes without this. Did you change lanes without indicating?
Yeah. We do that often here. That's accepted. Is that what he's utilizing to make decisions isn't rooted in what someone says. It's how they show up to say it. It's the presence that he's relating to. And that's why he, in this case, said yes, to the friend who was sharing with us how he got the Dalai Lama to
come to Southern California
and
do a bunch of things and go to see Shamu at SeaWorld.
That's right. He invited him to come with his family.
I think he just wanted to go see Shamu. Who doesn't want to see Shamu?
Well, it's the quality of the experience that caused him to say, yeah, I'll do it. And he made the point, this friend of ours made the point that how many times now he's known the Dalai Lama for 25 years and been around him in lots of different settings, how he also says no often. Mm-hmm. And again, it's one of those things of the discernment factor of what fits and what doesn't
Love
fit.
sometimes says no.
Big time. It's important that love says no. Yeah. And
well, how often do you see, Freeman, people that come into your world as a coach or who don't say no? Because they think that their understanding, their relationship with wanting to be spiritual, is tied into certain kinds of preconceived notions about what it is to be good that are mostly conditioned, socialized, experienced, structured imagination experience, and so they're unduly accommodating,
right,
and not quite as substantial as is required to be in your life, in what matters,
That's
in
right.
the world, bringing through passion and bringing through compassion, and showing up.
Yeah. I mean, it happens all the time, and there's levels of this at the levels of development. So for some people, the yes is a very codependent kind of people-pleasing pattern. But it's interesting because I'd actually like to advance this back to that kind of pendulum swing, that we swing one way or the other. I don't think balance is about always being balanced. It's about a shifting and a constant shifting, right? What happened recently, you brought this up, was you had gone through a period of saying yes a lot to things. And then there came a point where yes was a distraction. You'd yesed enough. You were yesing in order to break through some limitations, self-imposed limitations, right?
I said yes, finally, to somebody who invited me to contribute to a book on saying no. So I'm saying yes to pontificating about drawing boundaries and saying no. And I said, yeah, I have no time for that. I'll do it. And I'll take that on.
But this is an important important distinction. This is an important piece of the puzzle, is the going from, the level of yes and no, and how we at one point are operating in a yes and no paradigm from a codependent place and wanting to be liked. And maybe we grow to where we're not doing that. That's not really what it's about. It shifts to, I realize how I want to open more to possibilities. So I'm going through my yes phase, which we brought up, your yes phase, where you just determined at some point, I'm going to start saying yes to things because I'm saying no a lot of times. And so there was that experience started, right? And then the shift back to, okay, that was great. That was an interesting experiment. Now I'm going to go back to saying no, because that's really important.
And we'll see what happens tomorrow and next week. I have no idea.
And with that, we have
no idea. It's over.
We've come to the end of something that was fun. It's always fun. The show is a blast. So many great shows and great shows coming up. So folks, keep coming back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. We appreciate having you here, and we'll keep coming back. Thanks for listening.